Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen, 1893 to 1918. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, blood shod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime, dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face and his hanging face like a devil's sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from his froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. Okay, this is a poem by Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Owen was born in Shropshire. He spent most of his time growing up in Birkenhead and in Shrewsbury. He went to the University of Reading, and he didn't join up immediately in 1914. He didn't join up until the end of 1915. And then he was a second lieutenant, so he was in fact an officer. He was diagnosed with shell shock, and he was sent to a hospital in Edinburgh for treatment. And while he was there, he met Siegfried Sassoon, another very famous war poet, and Sassoon became his friend and his mentor for poetry. Then sadly in 1918, towards the end of the war, Owen was killed. So he was killed at the age of 25, while he's still a young man. And if we look at the title of this, it's Dulce et decorum est. It's sweet and fitting. It's sweet and right. It is meet and right. To die for your country, pro patria mori. And this actually comes from a poem by Horace, the Roman poet Horace, who's saying that it's a most fitting thing to die for your country. And this in itself, let's see, in the First World War, there was no conscription. Joining the army was entirely voluntary, and there was very, very good quality propaganda to influence the youth of Great Britain to sign up and fight for the glory of England. And at the end of this poem, there's a criticism of Jesse Pope, who was a journalist, who wrote lots of poems about how wonderful it was to fight for your country, and what a wonderful thing you were doing. And this poem, it looks at the other side. It's thinking about the horrors of the First World War, and criticizing the glorification of war and hero worship of soldiers. And it describes a gas attack and somebody who gets caught by the gas. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge. So that's a very strong start. Look at all these negative words. This is describing the soldiers who are bent over. They're bent double, like old men, like old beggars. So they look like beggars who've slept on the streets for many years, and it's as if they're hiding under sacks to keep warm. Knock-kneed is where your knees knock against each other when you walk. Coughing like hags. A hag is a very old woman, so they're coughing terribly. We cursed, we swore through sludge. So they're walking through the thick mud that's sludge. So I get the feeling their feet are going into the mud. And this is a group of soldiers who are walking from trench to trench, looking for any possible Germans who might be there. And this is effectively a patrol in the trenches. Till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. And then finally they turn round and they start to go home again, and they are trudging because they are tired. They're going towards their place of rest, which is a long way away. And if you look at this, all of these negative words: bent double, beggars, knock-kneed, coughing, hags, cursed, sludge, haunting. Okay, to trudge where you're really tired. Men marched asleep, so they were asleep but still marching. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshod. So many of them didn't have their boots, and they're limping on. They are shod. To shod is with a shoe, wearing a shoe. But so they were wearing shoes of blood. All went lame, so everybody was lame. They couldn't walk properly. All blind. They couldn't see. They were so tired. They were lame. They were blind. Drunk with fatigue. So they were really tired. They were as if they were drunk. They were staggering about because they were so tired. Deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. So they couldn't hear. They couldn't hear the 5-9s. These are German artillery shells that are dropping, that are falling past them. So they've gone past where the enemy is firing their shells. So they're actually quite close to the enemy. And they're lame, they're blind, they're drunk, they're deaf. They're absolutely exhausted. They're no good to anybody. And it's got this slow trudging sound. And then suddenly it changes. We have action. Gas, gas, quick boys. Notice the short words. These give this the change of pace. An ecstasy of fumbling. So fumbling when you can't do something properly, when your fingers are numb. And everybody's fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. So they're trying to fit their gas masks. And they're tired, and they're in such a state that it's very difficult to do this quickly. And if they don't, then they are going to suffer. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. But somebody didn't get their gas mask on in time. and they're yelling and stumbling and floundering and moving about like a man who's burning to death, or in lime. Lime is calcium oxide. It's very caustic, and it's something that they use to help dead bodies rot. So floundering, there's somebody moving about. They're writhing in pain in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. So I've got my gas mask on, and there these two holes, or these two sheets of glass, and he can see through this thick green light. So this is chlorine gas, and he can see this person. And then we've got this simile: as under a green sea I saw him drowning. So it's like this man who couldn't get his gas mask on was drowning in a green sea, in a sea of green chlorine gas. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. So this moves aside, and I still today I see him in my dreams, and there's nothing I can do, because I cannot help him, and he plunges at me, he pulls at me, guttering. A candle gutters as it goes out, choking, drowning. So I see this happening to him. I see this happening to him in my nightmares still. And this is showing how the horrors of war affect people, but over the long term. They see things like this, and this is not something that goes away. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in. So imagine if some nightmare you could walk behind the wagon, behind the cart that we flung him in. So we flung him. We didn't put him in there. We just flung him. We were so tired too. This was so horrific. And you could watch the white eyes writhing in his face. So his eyes have gone completely white, and this is because of the chlorine gas. And I'm certain he will never see again, if he lives. His hanging face, like a devil sick of sin. This is a very good simile. His face is hanging down, and he looks like a devil who is tired of committing sins. He's in a terrible state. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth corrupted lungs. So the wagon, it jolts as they go along. And every time it moves, blood comes out of his lungs and froth, because the chlorine gas has got inside him, and his lungs are bleeding, his eyes are white, and he's in a terrible state. And then this blood, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. So this is like a cancer. I think the bitter blood, cud, is what a cow chews, and then it regurgitates it and chews it again, and this is the cud. So it's like the blood coming out of his lungs is like the cows regurgitating this cud, and there are vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. So there are sores on his tongue, this person's tongue, that will never cure. It's something that will never go. And this describes this horrible scene. And then this last bit is the vilification of Jesse Pope, who's writing about the glory of wars, and other poets who are glorifying the war, to say that it's your obligation, that you will be full of glory if you come and fight for Britain. My friend, so if you could see this person dying of the gas attack, if you really could see this, you wouldn't tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. So if you could see this poor man suffering, you wouldn't write such high patriotic poems to get people to join the war. You wouldn't glorify what is happening. You wouldn't stir up the patriotism to children ardent for some desperate glory, to innocent people, to people who don't understand the reality of war. These are to children, but also many people, young people, joined the First World War. My grandfather, when he was 16, went to the First World War. And these people are ardent to get some glory. They want some part of the glorious thing of being a soldier, but it's not glorious. And if you'd seen something like this, you wouldn't tell them the old lie. And the old lie comes from Horace. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. So it is sweet and it is fitting. It's sweet and right. It is meet and right to die for your country. So, Dulce et decorum est by Wilfred Owen.